RMJ Movie Reviews back again. This is an on-the-fly movie review of Detroit, directed by Kathryn Bigolows. Wow. Okay. I am familiar with the Detroit riots. I grew up in Ohio, so I'm very familiar with the city of Detroit. I've been there quite a few times. I've seen the Motown House and all that, and I was familiar with the riots. Obviously, like I've said before in other videos, in my lifetime, the biggest riot of my day was the LA riots when I was 10 years old in 1992. LA riots, Rodney King riots, all that kind of stuff. So that's the craziest thing that I've seen in my lifetime, at least before I was a teenager and I saw 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina and all that other stuff decades later. But up until that time, that was the craziest thing at that young age that I had ever seen. But I was very familiar with the Detroit riots of the 60s. I, however, was not familiar with what the movie actually centers around is the murders in these the Algier, I think that's how you pronounce it, Algier Hotel, which was actually kind of in the back was a cover for they were pimping out of there, and having a good time. Didn't, at least from all accounts that I've read about the actual case, there wasn't anything like crazy going on. Just some regular pimping and drinking, smoking weed, that type of thing. Okay, you may not be good Christian things to do, but hey, whatever. They ain't robbing and killing and serial killing people and all that. But anyway, this film is based around those specific murders in that Algier hotel that was perpetrated by members of the Detroit Police Department, white cops, of 3 black men who were murdered. And they terrorized other individuals that night. Well, Detroit. I have, of course, my earliest film with Kathryn Bigolows was Point Break from 1991. And as you saw, I got a review for Strange Days on my channel. I love Strange Days. Kathryn Bigolows is a great filmmaker. I have never seen Zero Dark 30. I got to catch up with that. I saw pieces of it on TV, never saw it. And The Hurt Locker, I seen pieces of it again, but never saw it all the way through. So I got to catch up with those. So I haven't seen. I've read that those are very intense movies. What I can say about this film, Detroit, is this is about as hardcore as it gets. This is hardcore, tough filmmaking. This is not only is the subject matter very dark, depressing, horrific, and just a shameful, sad piece of American history. Also, the things that the actors who are recreating these events are called upon to do. Let's make no mistake, people. I mean, yes, acting and it's pretend, but this is definitely on the level of like, What's Love Got to Do with It, Color Purple type stuff, Schindler's List stuff. That when you're doing this stuff, you're doing this stuff. So we can say it's acting and it's pretend. Yeah, it is, and it's cut in a certain way, but they're doing these things. Just outside of the actual murders. Maybe a couple of hits might be fake, but this is the tension is I'm trying to think how I can break this down. Okay, I break down one aspect, which I've heard some reviews say. I've heard some people were kind of a little bit upset because the movie's called Detroit, but it's not actually about the riots. It's about this specific horrific event that was connected to the riots. This isn't this hotel event isn't specifically connected with the LA riots, but it's an extension kind of the chaos that was going on because basically what sets it off is the some of the guys, some of the men of color, the black men who were hanging out in this hotel, they were watching the events of the riots unfold on TV. Guy got a little drunk and he had a starter pistol. You start the race and F them pigs, blah blah blah, and he shot in his starter pistol. Sounds like a real gun. He fired the starter pistol in the direction of the National Guard, which the National Guard was called in to really lock down the city because it was going crazy because of the riots. And I'm not going to explain on how the riots started and all that. You guys look it up. So anyway, the National Guard thought they were being fired at for real, and they descended upon the area from where the shots, the starter pistol, were coming from. Obviously, if all this chaos is going on, people being murdered and shot, the National Guard had already blown away a little girl in a window. Everybody's on edge. Nobody is thinking like a normal human being because of the craziness of the situation. They descend upon the area from where the shots in. Only problem is cowboy, psychopathic Detroit police officer who's played by gosh, forgive me. I know he's from the Maze Runner movies. I'm sorry. Why am I forgetting his name? I'm blanking. The movie was so intense, I'm blanking on his name. But you guys know who I'm talking about, the kid with the eyebrows. He's basically a psychopath who's already killed somebody on the street. And basically, this guy's a cowboy. He gets out the car and shoots and asks questions later. And I mean, literally, if someone is running for him, he shot someone in the back with a shotgun, pump shotgun, as they were running. So this is obviously a very level-headed, sane individual who makes clear decisions. He comes in first. He goes off, does the same thing again, kills somebody else. And I also like to mention that he was having murder charges pressed against him by one of his white officials about him shooting the other guy in the back. He goes in first, National Guard comes in, and basically they're trying to figure out who fired off the shot. They can't find the gun. But the Detroit police is very determined to figure out who has this gun. They're so determined to find out who has this gun that nobody was actually injured with, that they just want to hold these people hostage and torture and terrorize them for hours upon hours and ultimately murder some of them because of a shot that was fired at them, which no one was hurt by. But that's how sane the Detroit police are in this film of the events in reality. And the big bulk of the movie is them basically sadistically, mentally terrorizing and physically and ultimately murdering 3 of these people at this hotel where these blank shots came from. I'm going to talk about, so the structure of the movie. Like I said, that's the big bulk of the movie, is basically this sadistic interrogation style, torture, sadistic abuse thing. That's the big bulk. The tension is so thick and it is so unbearable. It is unrelentingly brutal, sadistic, and I will say I've heard other reviewers compare it kind of to like Hostel and all that kind of stuff. A bigger comparison I'd probably I give it another. If you could compare it to a horror film, I compare it to this horror film. If anybody ever saw it. If anybody saw the remake of Mother's Day that starred Rebecca De Mornay, that movie is like really actually a prolonged torture scene. That is kind of what I compare. If I had to compare Detroit to a horror film, which I've seen other YouTube reviewers do, I would really more compare it to that film. Only difference being is that Mother's Day and Hostel and those things are horror exploitation films, imaginative, not based on reality. Detroit is based on actual sadistic crimes that were done by these Detroit police officers in real life. And let me tell you something else, people. I read up on the case at the library because I just wanted to get a more feel for what I was going into. And I read all the reviews about the film. Okay, the film, fine. But I wanted to read about the actual events from witnesses. And let me tell you all, for those of you who haven't read about the details of the case, What's on film? I know I've been hearing people say it's sadistic, it's the most thing ever put to film, which I don't think it's the worst thing ever put to film. But it is it's not the worst thing ever put to film, but it's just the intensity and the tension is so prolonged and there's no break from it that's what makes it feel that brutal. But when I read the details from the witnesses, what actually happened in real life, according to people who were there, from various cops who turned in the guys, who the perpetrators, and witnesses who were brutalized, what happened in real life was unfilmable. It was unfilmable. They couldn't film. They could not film what actually went down for real. And actually, the movie is actually a nice version of what actually happened, if you could use that word. But that's how I'd really compare it, and that's really what really just it becomes a situation of where, like, you can see that, first of all, the guy played by the guy from Maze Runner, fantastic job. He lived and breathed that character. He went to a very uncomfortable place, and I've seen him do interviews lately, and I could even tell in his interviews that he seems to be uncomfortable with talking about the part. But he's an actor. As an actor, you were called upon. What these actors did in this movie is totally immerse themselves in victims and in brutalizers. They, both sides of the equation, totally immersed themselves in these parts. These actors lived in. There was no acting going on here. They were in the moment. These actors, every single last one of them, went to some very frightening places. So when you're an actor and you're doing this kind of material, and especially when it's based on something that really happened, the reality is you can't pussyfoot around it. You got to do it all the way. Because if you don't go all the way, you're not really honoring, or at least trying to, you're trying to give some inkling of what happened and show people some reality. These actors had to do what they had to do to make it real, and they went there. And I commend every single last one of them, because people can say in interviews, "Oh, it's fake, it's all that," but it's you got to think, y'all. They're filming this stuff 17 8-hour days. Who knows how many takes they're doing? So they all went there. And this is the kind of acting that I'm definitely interested in, where you go there, and they all went there. And they did great. But the guy from the Maze Runner, what you're dealing with here in this character is basically a serial murderer, psychopath. That's what he is, because the sadism that he carries out, it reaches a point where it's not about actually finding the gun. It's just about these guys power tripping, and it's escalated by the fact that they hate black people. And then you add into the mix that you got white females who were, they were prostitutes, but you add into that mix of white girls in these psychopaths' mind messing with black men, and there's even a line in the movie where one of the cops, they got them all up against the wall. He walks up behind her. Why are you messing with them? Is there something wrong? You get into the is his package bigger than ours, and blah blah blah, and apparently they did sexually brutalize these white prostitutes that were there too. There's a kind of hints of it's really more kind of, I'd call it sexual, probably humiliation is more kind of what it is in the movie, but it's not what I read in those reports of what really happened. But it's really more a little bit of sexual humiliation there. It really goes. I mean, these cops who did this, they lost their minds. They totally lost their minds. Just stone cold, evil psychopaths, and then ultimately, so they brutalize the girls, humiliate them, terrorize them. They mentally terrorize all of them, and then they ultimately murder two of them, straight cold blood, and the guys get off the hook. So that's the big bulk, and I just commend the actors because, again, I can only tell you that these actors just went to such scary places. It's very dark, and I really wouldn't be surprised if, I know actors are professionals and all of that, but I really wouldn't be surprised if probably the people who played the victims didn't talk to the people who played the cops probably ever again for the rest of their acting career. Not out of like actual spite, but you live that stuff when you act. It was real. It was very real, and they did great jobs. It's just sad, but it's just the fact that it is prolonged and it does not stop. And it really, what I do like about the film is it shows that these particular cops were just evil, stone cold evil. And it wasn't even about finding who had the gun. It was about a sadistic, psychopathic, sick act of wanting to overpower somebody and brutalize somebody. That's plain and simple all it was. And the movie depicts that in chilling, unrelenting fashion, and so I think the movie should be given points for that. This third act of the movie is kind of the court proceedings, where everybody knows the story. These guys get off. I've heard some people complain about that. I didn't have an issue with that. I liked that court part of the movie because I think what the movie had to show was, in this age of, particularly stuff like the Trayvon Martin case, which is another shining example of something that's just so obvious to everybody else, but is not obvious to the people who were judging the case. You don't even have to have been there. I mean, all the evidence was there. That's a straight up manslaughter. He should have did some time, but he still got off. But it's the point that the movie is showing that this is a system that protects psychopaths who brutalize and murder black people. And that's just all it is. You know what I mean? The system condones psychopathic, racist, deviant behaviors against people of color. It condones it. I think that's what the movie is ultimately saying. Because, some people are saying that, it wasn't necessary. I've heard some people, it wasn't necessary to show that. It's too brutal. It's depressing. And I feel two ways about it. I feel two ways about it. I kind of feel like, well, and some people are like, oh, it's an exploitation movie. It's being exploitative. Every film is exploitative. Unless I make my own little version of Detroit with this camera right here in my living room, and I just spread it on YouTube, because I don't make no money off this, and make no money at all, then that would probably be the closest thing to something that's just genuinely like, oh, this is heartfelt. I want people to see what it is. But if it ain't that, it's exploitation. Films are made to make money. So every level of film something is being exploited. So we'll just get that out the way. Was it necessary to be that raw? Yes, I think it was. And like I said, I'm being clear. Everybody is brutalized. They brutalized all the black men, and they brutalized the two white girls. So no one is left out here. It also shows in the case that there were white officials within the police department that were gonna get in these guys' butts. It was ultimately when it went to court and the jury, which from what I understand wasn't like anybody from within the city of Detroit, was how these cops got off. But because they had a part earlier in the movie where the one official guy had charged the Maze Runner guy with murder, and ultimately these guys were gonna go down. but the jury got him off. So, all white jury. So that's that. But and some people are just like, oh, it's so depressing, so depressing. And you know what? I mean, it is depressing and it is sad. But I think also the movie shows that this stuff is still going on. Trayvon Martin case is a prime example. The other case, the one I saw, I don't know where the one where the guy was selling bootleg movies or something. I don't know if he was selling bootleg movies or he was selling bootleg something. And there's the big dude, and they had him, his hands were cuffed. And then I remember, like, he was on the ground, and then they shot onto him. It's on videotape. You see them murder the guy. And those guys got off. I still, in my mind, cannot understand if the guy's cuffed. We see the entire thing on tape. I mean, he's in that position. He's not a threat. I mean, the two cops are already on top of this guy, so they could just straight up jump him and give him a beat down. I mean, I didn't see. There's no way that he could be in a position that the dude was so big. I can't see him being like some Jackie Chan quick John Woo pull out a gun real fast and fire at him. I mean, the dude is so big, and there's no way he could have been a threat. Those cops still could have just beat him down or tasered him. And the fact that they shot him all up, I mean, you all look that up if you want to see it. Not like look it up and see it like for like kicks, but I mean just to, people are kind of knocking Detroit. You go take a look at that tape. As far as I'm concerned, the same thing. At least in terms of what the film is trying to reflect, what it's trying to reflect of reality. And those guys got off, so, But I just like that the movie presents it for what it is. It's an ugly, horrible act that was sadistically carried out by sick individuals. And this is the system that protects them because of who they did it to, which were black people. That's what the film is showing happen, and it's showing what happens now. So for that, Kathryn Bigelow did an extremely good job, and the fact that it's unrelentingly chilling and terrifying, I think it's a good thing because when these kind of brutal acts are carried out on black people and stuff, and not to mention the white girls who were there too because they suffered as well. The black person did this, they did that, but it shows it for what it is. A terrifying, it's horror. It is absolute terror and horror before they were killed. That's what it is, So I think it's good to show how much they suffered, to know what it really is, that they were victims of violence perpetrated by these Detroit police officers. And the movie depicts that very well. So for that, I commend Kathryn Bigolows. If you guys want to see it, that's your choice. I understand if you pass, because I wasn't going to go see the film. I'm a brave film watcher, so I chose to go see it, to have this experience. But it ain't a happy ride, folks. So that is my review of Detroit. Thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, hit the little bell when I have new videos, and leave comments down below about Detroit, how accurate it was to what really happened. If any of you know, if any of you all know anything about the actual cops, the victims of the situation, just leave comments down below. Let's share some things. So, RMJ Movie Reviews, I will be back with you guys soon.